To the Birdhouse Dynasty Show, playoff edition, Thursday night football, Rams and Niners. Let's get right into it. Any start sit questions, feel free to throw them my way. Any trades maybe happening, go ahead, toss them my way. Any questions you've got, dynasty related, fantasy football related, I don't care. Throw it over here. We've got some great action tonight with the Niners and Rams. First of all, Isaac Garendo is playing, so keep all your Izzy Abanikanda shares stashed away, or best ball, you can drop them, scoop up somebody else quick. I don't care. Whatever. Demarcus Robinson, he's playing as well. So keep that in mind with all your fourth, fifth wide receiver options, uh, especially in best ball. If you're looking for like Tyler Johnson or Tutu Atwell to blow up tonight, probably not as likely with D-Rob in the lineups. Of course, we're starting Puka and Cooper Kupp and Juwan Jennings tonight. George Kittle as well. Debo, on the other hand, is somebody you could sit if you're deep enough at wide receiver. And Purdy, I'm starting for sure. Matt Stafford as well, unless you've got some other options. And that's what we're going to get into next. And that's start sit decisions. One of my leagues, I've got to decide between Jameis Winston and Matthew Stafford. And yikes, what a decision here. But when I break it down and look at it, as volatile as Jameis Winston can be, even on his bad games, let me bring up some of his recent performances and just show you what his bad performances are, quote unquote. So actually, I'll just bring it up for you so y'all can see. If you're debating between Jameis Winston and somebody else, this week's matchup for Winston is the Chiefs. So it's a so-so matchup. I mean, I can totally understand being a little scared. However, let me bring this up for you right now. Here is this Jameis Winston and his. Here we go. All right. So Winston going back to, let's see. We're going to go back to the Baltimore game, week 8, which was his first start of the season, where he took 100% of the snaps, scored 30 that week, 12 the next week against Chargers. Then their bye. Then he had 30 against New Orleans, then just 13 against Pittsburgh, but then the big 40-point game against Denver, which I don't want to say erased all doubts or made him completely matchup proof, but I mean, look at it with last week's performance against Pittsburgh again with getting 19 points against Steelers defense is pretty impressive. So I want to say your floor is like 20 with Jameis. And then your ceiling is out of this stratosphere. Um, as you can see, I mean, the 13-point performance against the Steelers, that was the snow game. So unless there's snow in the forecast against the Chiefs, I wouldn't be too worried about starting Jameis. Now, Stafford, on the other hand, if we bring him up, let's do that. And let's look at him against the Niners earlier this year, just 16 of 25 for 221, one touchdown, no picks, and of course, no rushing. So basically 15 points for Stafford there. And the Niners would be considered most years the tougher defense. one of the tougher defenses for the Rams to play, similar to the Steelers and Winston. So um, the Niners D is sort of back. They had a big week last week against the Bears. Now, whether they're able to compound that performance into another good one tonight, that remains to be seen. But again, if I'm comfortable starting Puka and Cup, I should be comfortable starting Stafford. So I guess with the Stafford Winston thing, if it comes down to it, if you're a heavy favorite, I would have no problem starting Stafford. But if you're even or an underdog, I would go ahead and play Winston. I mean, that's what you've got somebody like Jameis Winston for, is to help you capture your ceiling. This is the playoffs. That's when you want the ceiling points. So I don't blame you. I honestly lean Winston. That's for that's my take on the matter. All right. So another league, I've got some other start sit decisions. For instance, one league, I get to pick two between Rashad White, Bucky Irving, mind you, pick two. Rashad White, Bucky Irving, DK Metcalf, Khalil Shakir, or Calvin Ridley. Woo! Okay, so let's break this down. Between Rashad White and Bucky Irving, well, we can pretty much pencil Rashad White ahead of Bucky as of right now. Now, all five of these guys don't play until Sunday, so there's time yet to decipher this. But with Bucky's hip injury, I would lean Rashad White as of this moment. I know that Bucky has had a few huge weeks lately, right? But last week with the injury, of course, he sat after the first quarter, and so Rashad White took over essentially. But if we go back 2 weeks, Bucky had the majority of the touches, right? 25 carries. I believe it was 3 catches. Rashad White just had 11 carries and 1 catch, but the snap share was even at 50-50, basically. So that said, Rashad White still had a solid yards per carry that game, 11 carries for, I believe it was 78 yards. So it was well over 6 carry. And obviously, their receiving chops are still there for Rashad. And the Bucks are taking on the Chargers, which is also key because the Chargers have a good rush defense. So I don't know that Bucky's going to have a big outing. Either of them have a big outing on the ground, at least. So I would look towards the better receiver. I would lean Rashad White. However, when you're looking at the other options I've got, one in DK Metcalf, who's been a staple in my lineup pretty much all season, up and down with him, better earlier, not so much later. He's still getting the targets, though. It's all more a matter of Seattle throwing the ball or not. And so when you look at the matchup for the Seahawks are taking on uh, who do they got this week? I get it down here. Sorry. Can't remember every matchup of the week. Okay, that's right. Sunday night against the Packers. Okay. So the Packers are a middle of the road defense against the pass. Decent pass rush. Jair Alexander probably out this week, so that would help DK's argument here. Now, Khalil Shakir coming off a monster week last week, and the Bills are taking on the Lions, who do like to give up some points to wide receivers. Uh, so I can see Shakir having a similar game as he's had the last 4 or 5 weeks. Now, last week he was able to sneak into the end zone on a long one, poor tackling by the Rams, but point being is that's really the only way Shakir is going to score a touchdown. He's more likely to just have a 5 or 6 catch performance for 60 to 70 yards. So you're looking at a solid floor for Shakir. While Calvin Ridley, on the other hand, Calvin Ridley is a super boom bust player. He's had, let me bring up Calvin Ridley here for you. Just look at his numbers. You can see what I mean. Okay. Okay. Here we go with Ridley. Now, you can see 8, 24, 1, 2, half a point, 7, then 22, 12, 25, 9, 14, 6, and 12. All right. So, point being is we haven't had many games in the 10 to 15 range there. We've had 112, 114, 112, and that would be it. So, 3 games in that middling range. Then you've got the 24-point game and the 22-point game and the 25-point game as the high end, while the low end, you got a 2, a 1, a 7, a 9, a 6 in there. So pretty inconsistent. Now, they are getting, who is the matchup? Yes, Cincinnati. So Cincinnati, not a good defense. So this is an opportunity to take advantage of the matchup if you so need. Now, in this matchup that I have, I am a 17 or 18-point favorite. So in that case, I'm going to lean towards the more consistent players. That would be DK and Shakir for now. Again, if Bucky is cleared to play, it's possible I could see putting him in maybe over DK. Same with Rashad. I could see playing either of them possibly over DK just because DK has had trouble getting over like the 10-point hump over the last 2, 3 weeks. But the targets are still there, and so I don't want to miss out on a big game from DK either. But Shakir is one for sure. I'm going to be putting in. Um, the Lions gave up a decent amount of yards to the Packers last week. Now, Jordan Love didn't throw it that much. He only threw it 20 times, but he still got to 200 yards. So that's a uh, good average per attempt. And I guess what I'm getting at is I foresee the Bills running more plays, essentially, is what's going to happen, in my opinion. So I don't think they're going to try and milk the clock here. This should be a high scoring game between the Bills and the Lions. So really what it comes down to is the Bills Lions game. I just want any piece of it that I can get. All right. There's a couple games this week similar like that. And sometimes it's as easy as just looking at the highest over unders. Um, the Texans Dolphins is another matchup that could get kind of crazy, and the Bengals Titans. So Ridley's involved in that one. This game tonight has the potential as well. Niners Rams, you could see it be a real tight one in the first half, like only, I don't know, 10 to 6, 10 to 7, and then it just gets crazy in the third and fourth quarters. These teams know each other very well. They know what plays work, they know what plays don't. And so they know how to address each other's formations, personnel. A lot of chess going on between McVay and Shanahan tonight, which makes it so interesting and intriguing from a fantasy perspective, just from an NFL fan perspective. Kenneth Walker didn't practice again today, so if you've got Zach Charbonnet, get ready because it might happen again. All right. So just have a backup plan again if you have Kenneth Walker because it's not looking good for his prospects this Sunday. All right. that again is the game against the Packers, which I don't see as a shootout. The Packers tend to kind of milk it a little bit with Josh Jacobs. They get the ground game going. They will milk the clock if they can, and they will. All right. The only time they're going to be slinging it 35 to 40 times is if it's an absolute necessity and they get down quick. And Seattle, could they? Sure, they could jump out to a big league. Will they? I don't know if I see that in the forecast, but it's hard to predict when a team goes down 14 to 3 or 10 nothing right away in the first quarter, how the rest of that game will unfold. Um, but I don't know if the Seahawks are a fast starting team. They've been, I mean, they're 8-5. They're leading the division, the West, and so they're playing well as a team with a new head coach, and so their prospects going forward. This is a huge game for them. They win this one, um, and the Niners win tonight, then they'd have a two-game lead in the division. So that'd be a huge, huge plus for the Seahawks. A Niners victory tonight. Um, but again, a loss for the Seahawks, and it could go the other way. I mean, if the Rams were to win tonight, they could be tied with the Seahawks for the division lead. So very interesting the way the matchups play out. It all starts tonight. We're getting into it. Let me go over uh, another tough lineup decision I've got, and this one again was involving a Buffalo player, and this one's Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid versus Isaiah Likely. Now, Likely is going against the Giants, a poor team, right? Kincaid going up against the Lions seems like a smash, right? Because it could be a shootout, but the Lions are actually number one against the tight ends position in fantasy. And so on one hand, I want to play Likely, but on the other hand, I think I'm just going to play Kincaid and play the numbers and that there's going to be a lot of points in this game and just go with it that way. I guess main reasoning is ceiling for Kincaid, I see as potentially higher than Likely's ceiling. Now, I know that Likely's had a couple of big, big games, but to try and predict that is a little crazy. And so I'm sticking with Dalton Kincaid is the main. I don't know what's going on here. They're making cookies Christmas time, right? Okay. Next up, the other option I have is Christian Watson, Elijah Moore, or Sterling Shepard. All right. So here again, we've got the Packers, the Browns, or the Buccaneers. And so the Buccaneers have had a great offense all season. Now they're taking on the Chargers, though. So could be a tough matchup. I don't see that one being high scoring, even though the Bucks score a ton. Defensively, they've been up and down. I could see an ugly one here where the Chargers are milking it, and then in the second half, the Bucks start throwing. So Shepard could get some targets that way, but we know that Mayfield's going to try and get Evans to his 1,000 yards. So he needs an average of 96 yards a game the rest of the season to do that. So I would expect Mike Evans to be getting 8 to 10 targets this week. What does that leave for Sterling Shepard and Jalen McMillan, who had a big game? And then there's Kate Otten. There's too many mouths there, in my opinion, to go with Shepard. So I'm going to go with Christian Watson coming off a big game last week, and then Elijah Moore and Jameis Winston getting the action there. So that's where I'd lean that. Elijah Moore is somebody who's been a very nice add over the last 3, 4 weeks with Winston taking over in Cleveland. Elijah Moore, David Njoku especially, and Jerry Jeudy, of course, have been getting tons of targets lately. Cedric Tillman should be back this week. However, David Njoku has not been practicing very much, not at all this week so far. So he is not expected to go right now. So I would lean more towards Elijah Moore, Tillman, and Judy. If you've got them, feel free to play them. I think they all get 7 to 8 targets this week. So fire them up, go get them Browns, right? Because I mean, who really wants to see the Chiefs win, right? Okay. Now, if we're looking at, let's see, I got two more touchy ones. In one league, I've got Bucky Irving or Tyron Tracy. Now, assuming that Irving plays, would you start Tracy versus the Ravens or Bucky versus the Chargers? Now, initially, off the cuff, I would just say start Tracy. Um, but if you think about it, it looks like Tommy Cutlets is going to be starting again for the Giants. They haven't been moving the ball that great. Uh, Man, rushing yards, the Giants are middle of the pack. I mean, the Giants still somehow, some way have been getting Tyron Tracy home every week. Like if they're down, then then Tracy is getting uh, a bunch of work through the air. So I think that Tracy's still a safe bet, safer than Bucky right now, just because the whole Bucky Rashad White situation could lead to a minimal output for Bucky, whereas Tyron Tracy, even if they get stuffed, he's going to get 5 or 6 catches and get you home there. Now, okay. So next up, we've got Zay Flowers or Malik Neighbors. Now, this one, same game, ironically, and I am personally leaning towards Zay Flowers right now. Now, if we bring up Zay Flowers' recent output, let's bring that up here for you all. Zay Flowers is one of those starters every week, pretty much. And so let's look at the last 3, 4 games for Zay. All right. So if we go back 5 weeks, we can see that against Denver, he had 29. He had his huge 2 touchdown performance. Um, for that was after that was Cincinnati, rough game. Pittsburgh 11 points, Chargers 11 and 10 against Philly last week. So nothing spectacular over the last 4 weeks for Zay. Now, if we bring up Neighbors, Neighbors over the last 4 or 5 weeks, same time frame, pretty similar. We got 14, 15, 12, 10, 14, and 14. So I think that you're guaranteed more targets with Neighbors, I would say, but the likelihood of getting in the end zone is better with Flowers. So that's what I would be looking for more so out of a fourth, fifth wide receiver in the lineup is more to have that touchdown upside. And whereas, your top 1, 2, 3 wide receivers, those are the guys that are going to get you that floor. They're going to be solid 15-point guys. So that's where I'm leaning is Zay Flowers right now. But if this game were next week, then maybe we'll see if Neighbors gets in the end zone finally. I mean, Neighbors has not gotten in the end zone since week 3. He's sitting on 3 touchdowns. He's been sitting on that since his injury. and the week before that against Dallas. So um, actually, Dallas was the game where he got really banged up with the concussion. He had all that all that work that game. They were getting him the ball however they could possibly get him the ball. And not telling you to bench your studs, but personally, I'd lean Zay Flowers in this matchup. Right. Now we get into defenses. And defenses are very tricky sometimes, but you can find ways around it. Um, One of the main things I look at is offensive line versus defensive line. And what I'm getting at there is the amount of pressure that the defense can get on the quarterback. Pressure leads to bad passes, leads to turnovers and pick sixes. And that's what we want from the defense. We want sacks, we want turnovers, right? So when we're looking at this one particular game, I've got the Dallas D at Carolina or the Arizona D versus New England. So New England has been notoriously bad offensive line so far this year, and then they've got a rookie quarterback in Drake May, who's been very solid in spite of his offensive line. Meanwhile, you've got Dallas's D, who's been looking pretty decent the last few games, and then we've got at Carolina, and Carolina surprisingly actually has a decent offensive line. So when we're talking Dallas D versus Arizona D, who actually has been putting decent pressure on the quarterback, I'd actually lean Arizona's D in this matchup. Now, I know Dallas is the higher profile team, but that doesn't mean that they're better than the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals have a better record than the Cowboys. So in this case, I'm going to lean Arizona at home against New England. This is a game that Arizona needs to win to stay alive in the NFC West. And so I think Kyler puts up a good performance this week, and that bodes well for the defense. It really comes down to if the Cardinals can jump out to a lead early on, that'll get the pressure on Drake May and hopefully lead to turnovers. All right. Bryce Young also Bryce Young has been playing much better of late. Last month, since the benching, he's come on very well. And so I would lean again the Arizona D over the Dallas D in this instant. And another interesting set start sit one I've got Dalton Kincaid or Ferguson. Now we've got we got Hergot chiming in here, and he's asking Pollard or Garendo this week. Ooh, that's a good one. Garendo's a go tonight, and I think that just off the hip, I would say Garendo has the higher ceiling. Um, Tajay Spears is healthy again, so uh, that hasn't mattered all that much because Pollard's been putting up numbers lately. I think Pollard got over 100 yards last week. I'm going to bring them both up here for you all to look at. Um, here we go. Let's bring up Tony Pollard here. We haven't taught him yet tonight. So, okay, here we go. There's the last 5 or 6 weeks for Tony Pollard. Okay, here we are. Um, and Hergot mentions Pollard's not practicing too, which that's right. That does matter. I don't know that Pollard's so what it's an ankle injury here. Uh, does that mean he's not gonna play though? He's probably gonna play. Let's see him practice. Okay, so with Spears healthy and Garendo being a go, I would definitely feel I would I would definitely feel bad if I didn't have Garendo in the lineup and he does well versus Pollard. Pollard seems like more of a floor play where Garendo's more of the ceiling play here. So I would be going Garendo, even if both were healthy. You add in the fact that Pollard is banged up with the ankle injury and could at any moment during the game be pulled and just they let Spears take over the game from the rest of the, whether it's in the middle of the second quarter or at halftime or even in the third quarter. Spears could take over the majority of the workload. So that would make me lean more towards Garendo. I know that Garendo's banged up as well, but if he's a go, he's a go, right? So that's where. All right, now we've got Armando with a question here. How are we feeling about Garendo tonight? Start one full PPR. Garendo, Devonta Smith, Debo, or ETN. Okay. Wow. Being playoff time and what we've gotten to this point in this season from Debo and ETN, I would not be trusting either of them. So on my playoff with my playoff hopes riding on it, especially the way they've performed this year. So I would eliminate Debo or ETN from that. It would come down to Garendo and Devonta Smith. All right. So it's a full PPR, so that does slightly help Devonta Smith. Now, Devonta is not somebody who's going to get 8 or 9 catches in a game. Obviously, he's more of a home run hitter, but that doesn't mean that he can't get 5 or 6 catches, right? Now, Garendo, on the other hand, man, this is a tough one. Garendo or Devonta Smith? Let's see. Devonta last week, I believe he caught one of the touchdowns from Hurts, even though Hurts only threw for 108 yards. Devonta still ended up okay, I guess, with a 4 for 37 and a touchdown performance, right? Um, Personally, I'd lean more towards Garendo. That's my call. I would say Garendo. All right, Armando. I would say Garendo slightly over Devonta. That's where I'm looking at it from that perspective. Is just the volume is not going to be there for Devonta. If the Eagles get down, then maybe they're throwing the ball more. Now Devonta doesn't need volume necessarily, but that being said, with Garendo, I know I'm getting the volume. Okay, so yeah. What about Herbert or Purdy? Ooh, that's a good one. Mhm. Herbert taking on the worst pass defense in the league in the Bucks, and Purdy, of course, taking on the Rams tonight. Ooh, man, I am gonna lean Herbert in that one, just because with the Bucks defense, I don't see there's a way that I'm going with Herbert. This one's very close. You can't really go wrong picking either one. Of course, until the game's over. But with the Niners and Debo being down, Ayuk out, I don't know. Of course, I'm going to say this, but and then Purdy's going to throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns, but I would lean more towards Garendo getting the touchdowns today. I guess I could see 1 or 2 touchdowns from Garendo and then maybe a couple of touchdown passes from Purdy. Whereas Herbert, I could see getting, you know, 250 to 300 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns against the Buccaneers defense. So that's just I know I watch a bunch of the Buccaneers defense. It's Winfield is out now. He's a huge key to our secondary. With him out, I just see a huge hole there. Even with Will Dissly possibly being out, he's doubtful right now, so he's probably not going to be in there. Herbert hasn't had a problem ever finding the second or third tight end, whoever it ends up being. Lad McConkey is just going to run wild. And I wouldn't be surprised if Quentin Johnston or Josh Palmer or Devarian Davis or whoever else the Chargers decide to throw out there gets into the end zone. This is one of those sneaky games with the over under. I could definitely see this one going over just because of the way the Bucks play. I could see them getting down early and then having to play catch up, and that would create a ton of more offensive plays for both teams. The Chargers don't have a healthy J.K. Dobbins, so they're going to have to lean more on Justin Herbert and his arm to win this one. So I could see Kamani Vidal getting more involved, and he's more of a pass catcher than Gus Edwards. And so I I lean Herbert here. It's a very close one, honestly. If you want to go with Purdy, I don't blame you. But yeah, I'm gonna say Herbert for you there. All right. What else you got for me, Armando? Anything? Hergot, you got another question out there? Go ahead, fire them my way. That's what I'm here for, guys. Um, I've got my last one that was a tricky start sit was Jake Ferguson or Dalton Kincaid. And Ferguson going against the Panthers, who are the worst in the league defending against the tight ends. Meanwhile, Dalton Kincaid going against the Lions, who are the best at defending against the tight end. This one would seem pretty easy to determine on the outside then. But again, when you really look at the matchups, I can see the Lions Bills game going very high scoring, whereas the Cowboys Panthers could go either way. That's a game where you've got some very questionable defenses. Um, I don't know. I'm leaning Ferguson right now. I haven't made my call yet, but I'm leaning Ferguson at the moment. Uh, Hergat chimes in with another one. Ooh, Jalen Waddle or Amari Cooper. Hoo. Okay. So whether that's half PPR or full PPR, I don't think that really matters in this case. Um, I'm going to just look at. I know that Waddle's had a couple of good games now, and I like the way that Tua's been playing recently. So full PPR. All right, thanks, Hergat. Okay, so we got Waddle over the last 3 weeks. Here we go. Big numbers for Jalen. You can see the targets there. He's got 12, 4, and 9, and then catches wise 9, 4, and 8 with that big 144-yard game 3 weeks ago against New England. Now they're taking on Houston. Meanwhile, you've got Amari going into that Bills Lions game. Ooh, this is a tough one. So Mari finally had a good game last week, and I've been saying all along that he seems like a real good fit with Bills offense. Um, but at the same time, I just I trust Waddle slightly more. I'd lean Waddle. Um, don't blame you. Like if you have Josh Allen in that league, go ahead and start Amari, try and with the stack. But otherwise, I am going with Jalen Waddle here. Um, he's been too good over the last 3 weeks to overtake somebody who's just had one good game now. I know Keon Coleman is out, but you still have Shakir. Kincaid is back. So that will take one or two targets away from Cooper, I think. You know, this game could be a circus, but I could also see the same thing with the Dolphins and Texans. Those two like to play in shootouts. Could be back and forth, just whoever has the ball last in that game. So I think I'd lean slightly more towards Waddle and his ceiling versus Amari's his ceiling in this one. We all know Amari had 60 points last year in the semifinals and the playoffs, but don't expect that to happen now. Of course, sure it will, but Waddle can get a 200-yard game too, just as easily. All right, so there you go, Hergot. Go with Jalen. All right. Any other questions out there, guys? Tomorrow, just so you know, Matt English and I are going to be putting out our video on our misses for the season. That's right. We're going to talk about some of our guys that we were high on this year that didn't quite cut it. Speaking of the Texans, I know Matt was huge on Tank Dell this year. He's going to tell you all how wrong he was on that one. And I'm sure that means Tank Dell will go for a $150 and 3 touchdowns this Sunday. So it's about time Tank does something, right? Um, I'm liking that Texans Dolphins game a lot. Should see some fireworks there, I think, and should be a good one. All right. Any other games you guys have any questions on this week? There's a lot of intriguing matchups with playoff implications for the regular NFL, not just our fantasy teams. I guess one game I want to touch on, and that's the Steelers and Eagles. I wouldn't be so afraid of the Eagles wide receivers. Now I know I just said to start Garendo over Devonta Smith, but with the Eagles, I think that being that they didn't throw a lot last week and AJ Brown's comments, I think they'll, the squeaky wheel gets the grease type thing. I think I would expect AJ Brown to get a ton of targets in the first quarter, or at least the first half of this matchup, and then see where the game flow is going from there. But the Steelers defense is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but I do think that the potential for a big game from a wide receiver, one of the wide receivers from the Eagles, is definitely there. All right, because the Steelers are going to sell out to try and stop Saquon. That's no doubt, and Hurts should be able to take advantage of that somehow. And so that's where I'm seeing that game going. Now, I'm not saying the Steelers couldn't win that game, but you might be surprised here and see a little more points in this game than you would think on the surface. All right. These teams aren't familiar with each other. Yes, they're in the same state, but they play each other once every 4 years. Okay. It's more in those interdivisional games where you could see the defenses kind of tighten up, and that's where you'd see the lower scoring games. Here it's a non-conference game, so you are more likely, I think, to see a shootout in that kind of atmosphere. All right. As far as the Bears Vikings, that's one of the Monday night games. We've got 2 Monday night games this week. I know the Falcons at the Raiders isn't exactly that exciting, but we have plenty of fantasy names in that one as well. Drake London, you know, Darnell Mooney is a good flex play. He's back and healthy. Jacoby Myers is a good flex play. Um, Now, Sincere McCormick, I don't know if your fantasy season is riding on Sincere McCormick as your RB2. I'd be a little concerned. Okay, but if the rest of your team is awesome, then I guess it's all right. Uh, as for the Falcons, I would think they ride Bijan heavily and maybe finally get a win. They've had a rough patch here over the last few weeks. Obviously, has to do with Kirk Cousins' struggles. And, I don't know if we'll see Penix this season. I don't know if they're ready to make that change, if they want to just wait until the offseason and give Penix a full offseason with him expecting to get the start week 1 next year. But again, don't be shocked if we see a little bit of Penix at the end of this season. So that game could be a little more exciting than you think as well. But back to the Bears Vikings again. This is going to be a interdivisional game, tough NFC North battle. Now both teams they just saw each other a couple weeks ago, and Justin Jefferson was shut down, And I saw somebody on one of online ask, should I be worried about starting Jefferson this week? Please, no. Unless it's a super shallow format and like your other options are Amon Ra, uh, Chase, Nico Collins, and Puka, right? And you can bench one of them, then maybe you're considering benching Justin Jefferson. Okay. But I don't want to see any like I'm not starting Jordan Addison over Justin Jefferson just because the Bears got his number. Okay. Um, not starting Jacoby Myers over Justin Jefferson. I'm not starting DK Metcalf over Justin Jefferson. All right. Jefferson's still a top 3 or 4 option, regardless of the matchup every week. I don't care if Sauce Gardner's on him. All right. You got to start Justin Jefferson in the playoffs. It's just too much of a the guy can score anytime he touches it type thing. I would not be advising anyone ever to sit somebody like Justin Jefferson in week 1 of the playoffs. All right. See some of these other matchups here. We got Colts at Broncos. That one's interesting with Anthony Richardson versus Bo Nix. Both of them probably in most of your fantasy lineups and super flexes. Um, I don't think I'd be starting any of the Colts wide receivers there. The Broncos D, especially the secondary, is solid unless you take the Cleveland game into consideration. But that's because Jameis Winston just was throwing right into their strength. He didn't care. I don't think that that's Anthony Richardson's strength. So I would see potentially a big carry game for Jonathan Taylor, which we haven't seen from the Colts recently, especially since Richardson's come back and started. Um, so I've got Matt's been asking me this whole week, essentially, should I start Jonathan Taylor or AJ Brown in one of his flexes? Now, the reasoning for that is he's got other guys like Jawan Jennings who have been outperforming, and I agreed with him. Like you have to have Jawan Jennings in his lineup, but between AJ Brown and Jonathan Taylor, it's a tough one. Um, Told him as of right now, I'd lean AJ Brown just because I do think he's going to get more targets this week. Whereas Jonathan Taylor, again, going up against the Broncos D, the Broncos D is solid either way uh, against the run and the pass. And so this is a game where I more likely see it to be low scoring. And so that's the kind of game script that I try to avoid especially in a fantasy playoff type atmosphere, right? Other games out here, we got an ugly one with Jets Jaguars. But again, there's fantasy relevance here. You've got Brees Hall, who's questionable again this week. I personally think that they will sit him one more game. Then you've got Garrett Wilson, Devonta Adams, definitely full bore starts. Jacksonville's one of the worst pass defenses in the league. As for Jacksonville, ETN, mm, ETN, I can't start. Sorry. Brian Thomas, go ahead though. Fire him up. Evan Ingram, if he's healthy, fire him up. I don't care that Mac Jones is playing. The Jets just don't know what they're playing for at all right now. I don't know if they have any pride, so I can't say that they're playing for pride. But yeah, Washington and the Saints. Jake Hayner getting the start here for New Orleans. Picked up Washington's D in a couple of leagues, firing them up right away. Brian Robinson, this is a smash spot for him. Terry McLaurin, fire him up. Jaden Daniels, fire him up. Fire up all the commanders you can. Zach Ertz, if you need to, go ahead. The Saints could defense isn't that bad. I mean, they could pose a little bit of a fight, but again, Jake Hayner's running it. He's just getting the opportunity here. Between him and Spencer Rattler, I don't know which of the bad quarterbacks is worse. So could be an ugly one. This one is one where you could see a team giving up near the end of like the third quarter where Washington's out to a lead, and then you see some. That's why I like Washington's defense so much in this matchup. They have a good pass rush. The Saints are not. They don't have a great offensive line. And then you've got Jake Haener at the quarterback spot. They've got injuries all over the place at wide receiver. It's going to be the Alvin Kamara show. He's going to get 30 touches likely, and you know, end up with 85 yards probably. So this one just has ugliness written all over it. Washington's way, in my opinion. All right. So if that's all for the questions, then I think that's we're about 20 minutes away from game time. When does this one start? 7:15. Yeah, we're about 25 minutes away. So I'll let you all get your snacks, get ready for this opener, playoff opener for fantasy football. We got to oh yeah, Alan jumped in here. Just wanted him. He wants to tell Hergot that the Colgate Firing Squad owns the future. Okay, yeah, I'm in that league too, buddy. So I I know you've got a lot of good roster value there, but roster value doesn't equal wins. So where are you at this week? Are you in the playoffs, Alan? Are you in the playoffs? Just wanted to know here. I'm gonna bring up that league just so y'all can see what we're talking about here. Uh, there we go. And there it is. Yep. Yours truly got the bye this week. And yeah, Alan's on the outside looking in this week and next week and the following week. Good luck with that, Alan. Way to encourage your listeners. Yeah, well, when you're competing against me, I have to show my dominance here. Now, Alan, you have done a magnificent job of building up value on that team. It'll be an interesting offseason for you. That's all I got to say. And yes, in the years to come, you should should have a very strong contender on your hands there. All right. But yeah, Alan, you got any lineup questions this week? Go ahead, throw them down here. I can stay on for another minute or two before we go ahead and flip on the old Amazon Thursday night production of the NFL. This week it is the Rams at the Niners in an NFC West classic. Should be exciting. I I like both Rams wide receivers. Who doesn't? I don't even mind Demarcus Robinson. I know he didn't get a catch last week, but he had two possible touchdowns. He could have gone 2 for 101 and two touchdowns last week. He had one called back and then one bad pass interference that was called on him. That should have been on the defense anyway. Um, and then for the Niners, gotta love Juwan Jennings, George Kittle, and Garendo. I like Purdy as well. I know I sold Armando to start Herbert over Purdy, but that was a very, very close one there. I kind of like the Rams pass defense a little, at least their pass rush has been getting things going. Now, the the Bears had a good defense too, and they rolled into uh San Francisco and didn't have a good week last week. So I don't know. These two teams know each other though so well that I don't know that I don't see a big 300-yard performance from Purdy. Could he get two or three touchdowns? Absolutely. But with Garendo being healthy, I think that we get a good healthy dosage of him. Either way, it should be an exciting one tonight. Be sure to throw me any of your other questions at buymeacoffee.com/birdhouse dynasty show. You can also check out the Patreon, patreon.com/birdhouse dynasty show. Check out my 2025 rookie draft rankings for Superflex tight end premium leagues. Those are up and ready to roll. Uh, any questions on that, of course, feel free to ask. There's a lot of movement that's going to happen over the next few months there. We have, as we get through the playoffs, then the combine will be there for us in February. And that's where we'll definitely get to differentiate between some of these awesome running backs in the 25 class. That is the strength of the 2025 class. And it should be a real interesting offseason where we have a bunch of good rookie running backs merging with all of these good veteran running back seasons. So whether we want to go young or old this offseason, it should be a good, interesting offseason at the running back position. All right. Well, I appreciate you all joining tonight. Thank you and enjoy the game.